Lately, I've been reading a ton of toxic Yuri, a genre that I'm surprised has enough popularity as it does to have earned a specific moniker that is relatively well known. You know, it's not just Yuri with toxic relationships. No, there's enough of us out there where we've just got a shorthand for it. And as I've been reading more and more of this stuff, I found myself asking, why do I love this so much? I'd go so far as to say I prefer the toxic stuff to the saccharine stuff. Bloom into You may have been my lesbian awakening, but it's the scary and manipulative women that awaken other sorts of feelings. A simple possible explanation for the appeal of the genre could simply be that toxic characters make for good plot drivers, but I believe the answer to be a bit more complex than that. Of the media I'll be discussing today, at least one of them carries that watching a train wreck feeling, the sort of story where you're somewhat repulsed yet can't look away, but I don't find this to necessarily be a fundamental part of the genre. Indeed, while I've found the specificities can be quite variable, depending on things like the character whose perspective you're following, or the type of dysfunction being explored, a theme I found consistent across most of the works I've read is that of an enjoyment in the suffering. What makes Toxic Yuri so compelling is the desire to be hurt. And girls kissing, that's important too. If it weren't obvious before, I will clarify now that the stories I'm talking about are of a sensitive subject matter, both due to potential discomfort of the scenarios themselves, as well as just sexual content more broadly. My Girlfriend Isn't Here Today is one of my favorite Yuri of all time, and one that I've had no luck getting anyone else to read. The title immediately makes clear what the story will be about: cheating, something that is uncomfortable, but still the most tame of the works I plan on talking about today, so strap in. The main character in this story is a high school girl named Yuri, a somewhat shy and reserved girl who is dating the athletic and outgoing Nanase, a member of the school's volleyball team. Yuri and Nanase's relationship is something that they keep secret from their classmates, which is the initial point of tension that leads to the cheating. Yuri wants their relationship to be public, Nanase is worried about bullying, not so much for her own sake, but more for Yuri's. This is something that I actually really like about this story. The social consequences of living in a homophobic society is often glossed over in anime and manga, even in stories where it's the central conceit. Not all, obviously, but enough where I find it refreshing nevertheless. Yuri is also shown to be somewhat of a social outcast, or at least a bit of a loner. Nanase isn't just part of the volleyball team, the team is her entire social circle, and Yuri is shown just sort of tagging along to spend time with Nanase. Nanase is so committed to keeping the relationship secret, in fact, that they don't even call one another by their first names in public, which, for those unfamiliar with Japanese culture or whatever, is something that would indeed be normal for close friends of the same gender. The display of distance they put on is significant enough as to where Yuni's jealousy and ill-contentedness make sense. And thus, this feeling of being on the outside, her one true connection, more occupied with her sport than her girlfriend, creates the vulnerability from which the plot begins. Yuni is jealous of the attention Nanase is willing to give other girls, feels like she doesn't receive enough affection, and rather than keep those feelings to herself, she instead posts her feelings to a vent account. Thus, as Yuri wallows to herself that Nanase can't spend time with her due to sports practice, we are introduced to Fuko, who joins her outside. Fuko is amazing. I love her. I love her so much. She's also shown to be a bit of a loner, and despite not interacting with Yuri before, treats her with an initially uncomfortable amount of intimacy, the exact opposite problem Yuri has with her relationship with Nanase. She's also reading a book with a title that is the least subtle foreshadowing of all time. After Yuri tries to reject Fuko's advances, she reveals that she had found Yuri's vent account, and though she doesn't use it as blackmail, it's enough leverage for her to come onto her directly, proposing to be her girl on the side. Why did I say it like that? Number 15. Thus, the plot begins in earnest, as Yuri is slowly whittled down to caving in, each chapter more painful yet addicting than the last. I don't want to give a full play-by-play or anything like that. I'd recommend just reading it for yourself. But what I enjoy so much about this series is that, though others may disagree, I actually find every character at least somewhat likable. Maybe that's a self-report, but God forbid a woman enjoys seeing her worst impulses personified. Yuri's lack of contentment with her relationship feels relatable at first, but as the story goes on, it becomes clearer and clearer that literally nothing will ever satisfy her, and she has zero sense of personal accountability. She's cheating because Nanase isn't giving her enough attention, she's cheating because Fuko is seducing her, and when neither of those excuses make any sense, she'll just refuse to think about it. Fuko's definitely taking advantage of her at the start, but Yuri starts initiating more and more as the story goes on, and Fuko, oh my god, she's a manipulative bitch. And I love her for it. While Yuri is a manifestation of clinginess and a constant need for attention, I find Fuko even more fascinating. At first it seems like she's just getting off on destroying someone else's relationship, but as the story goes on you see that there's more to her than just that. In my reading, Fuko seems like she's got as much of a need for attention as Yuri does, but expresses it just completely differently. It's not that she enjoys destroying Yuri and Nanase's relationship, it's that she both recognizes Yuri as someone as miserable as she is, and wants to shower her in affection because it's something she herself lacks, and also that she wants Yuri to need her too. Later in the series, you get to see glimpses of what each of the girls' home lives are like, and it's shown that Yuri was raised by a single mother who is somewhat distant and busy with work, and she's had to take care of all the housework and essentially be the adult of the house from a young age. Fuko, on the other hand, is a model honors student, but her parents give her nothing but abuse, constantly shaming her and telling her she isn't good enough. Yuri is emotionally neglected and clingy as a result. Fuko is constantly ridiculed and now wants to give someone all the love she never received herself. This gets even more explicitly articulated later down the line. I mean, just look at the cover for Volume 6. I want to be both of them. I want to be both of them. The art throughout is just so amazing. I love how Yuri can be both pathetic and adorable. I love how Fuko can jump from being almost manic with hearts in her eyes to cold and calculating, and then just to sad and down to earth. Also, I love how the text boxes change color to black whenever a character has a cruel thought or says something mean. It's so good. And of course, we can't forget Nanase. At first I thought she'd really just be the victim in the situation, left somewhat shallower than the other two girls due to her innocence in the situation, but that's really only at the start. She finds out about the cheating, and rather than doing the sensible thing and breaking up with Yuri, she decides to give her a second chance. And it doesn't take a detective to guess how that goes. While Nanase is still undoubtedly the most blameless of the three in the main trio, and her struggle of wanting a girlfriend and also wanting to be on a sports team is in fact normal and healthy, and Yuri is the one making it weird, her inability to cut things off when they don't work out is her toxic trait that just allows the whole train wreck to just keep going. Nanase is also the only character who actually tries to make positive changes. She listens to Yuri and tries to give her more of what she wants without compromising her own desires. It also helps that she's got a great friend on the team who is the only positive influence in this entire series and would definitely be a better fit for her romantically, but the series is still running, so we'll see what happens. The thing I love most about these girls in this series is probably that I relate to them all in some way, more so in mindset than in actions though. Yuri is probably the girl I'm most like, not that I'd ever cheat on anyone, but that I tend towards being clingy and melt whenever someone is nice to me. I've also had the experience of dating a girl who winds up more preoccupied with the sports team than myself, so I definitely get the feeling of being left out or just a tack on towards a friend group. Fuko speaks to my desire to just shower someone in adoration to an unhealthy degree, the savior complex that's reflective of all the love she wishes she could have but is constantly denied, hence the very real hurt at Yuri's rejections despite saying she's fine being the side girl. And Nanase, well, I definitely get the denial to acknowledge obvious problems and stay with the comfort of a sinking ship and trying to fix what is clearly already broken, rather than wanting to make the hard choice of moving on. Altogether, My Girlfriend Isn't Here Today succeeds at what it does in creating a relationship where all three girls are miserable with one another, and yet all have complementary personality traits that make it so they'd rather be miserable together than do anything to change their situation. Yuri really does love Nanase, but comes to feel that way towards Fuko too, so she continues to cheat, despite knowing the harm she's causing. Nanase is too determined to fix things than acknowledge her reality, and Fuko can't be honest with herself about what she wants, and just continues to cause drama in the hopes it'll make her happy. It's a great series, and I'm very eager to see how the story continues to play out. Although the monthly release schedule is killing me, I know there's no rushing great art, but oh my god, I'm so impatient. The other week, a chance Steam recommendation introduced me to the works of Nadia Nova, a type of toxic Yuri that is definitely not for everyone, and with a content warning that should absolutely be heeded. Having now read 4 of her visual novels, recurring themes include abuse, dubious consent, violence, both sexual and otherwise. Some of these have even been removed from itch for violating the content policy, which I'm assuming is the bit about no works that glorify sexual violence. They exist in an interesting space where I would feel weird to say it's fun to read them, but they captivate me. It's not the drama-filled high school antics of My Girlfriend Isn't Here Today, but very detailed depictions of sapphic relationships that leave how consensual or wanted all of the interactions are up to interpretation. Most of the protagonists are, to put it bluntly, sort of pathetic in a way that I just find incredibly relatable. Girls with self-esteem issues so low that borderline assault is something that I won't say no to, and in some ways feels indiscernible from real love, especially in that most of these stories, the perpetrators are hardly any better than the protagonists, with issues so severe that it seems their violence is genuine affection. In what I think is the best of the 4 novels I read, Malcatras Maiden, the protagonist Liliana is a maid to the incredibly manipulative and abusive Lady Malcatras, who is indisputably evil and, quote unquote, rescues orphans to raise them as her servants. The story is part like cool battle-made anime action with a hunter x hunter battle system, and half Liliana being simultaneously enthralled with, attracted to, and terrified of the lady she works for. I won't spoil the main plot because it's free and genuinely very well written. If the content warnings and pornography that are applicable to all of his works don't put you off, that is. One aspect I found really captivating, however, was a scene towards the middle of the novel, the only real sex scene in the work, and one that I find absolutely fascinating. While Liliana and her lady's relationship is not the mutual dependence I adore, but rather a more traditional one-sided abusive relationship, this does not apply to her relationship with her coworker slash childhood friend slash sister, Malarca. Sister-themed incest is another recurring theme in these works, which doesn't do anything for me, but makes me think the author probably doesn't have any siblings. Anyways, Malarca is probably the only character in the story who does, unequivocally and genuinely, care about Liliana's well-being. She's aware of how deep under Malcatras' spell Liliana is, refer to the title, and later down the line makes an attempt to help her realize how messed up their situation is. She's also very one-sidedly in love with her, needy for attention, and persistent in her advances to a point in which it's questionable if Liliana is consenting or not. Liliana, as our point of view character, comments a couple times throughout the story that she doesn't have eyes for anyone but Malcatras, yet is also involved with both Malarca and a nurse who works there, in what feels less like a mutual decision, but rather Liliana submitting to whoever wants her because she can't be bothered and any attention is better than nothing. To say this speaks to me is an understatement. So, midway through the story, after some plot happens, Malarca asks Liliana to have a sleepover, the way they used to when they were younger. Up to this point in the story, Malarca's been wearing a mask as she goes about her maidly duties. But here, we finally see her take it off, and for perhaps the same unexplained reason that Liliana is a puppy, Malarca is a vampire, or maybe a lamprey. And the scene that follows is absolutely mesmerizing. Malarca is not gentle, Malarca is not nice. You're not a bad girl, you're just a stupid girl who doesn't know what's good for her. Shivers, I get shivers. I would consider myself to be more experienced than the average person in the realm of being bitten by beautiful women, and so for those unaware, it hurts a lot. I've never had the skin broken, but it is excruciating, so needless to say I was wincing a little bit the first time reading this, where not only is the skin broken, but shredded, blood everywhere staining the sheets. It's a scene where you, the viewer, are no doubt supposed to be enjoying it, and it's fascinating to read, and equally fascinating to try to figure out what either of the characters are really feeling. It's like cute aggression taken to an extreme. Toxic Yuri in its purest form, where neither character is really happy, but they'd rather be with each other than alone. One unable to love without violence, and one unable to be loved without violence. This game has less sexual content overall compared to some of the other novels, or at least the plot and the story is the focus and somewhat more distinct from the sexual content, but that makes the moments of intimacy all the more striking to me. Well, I'd love to go through every single one of Nadia Nova's novels, or at least the ones I've read, as they all scratch slightly different itches in the kind of toxicity they portray. That would make this video far longer than I'd like it to be, so I'll limit myself to one other, Slime Feet, the first one I read, and the one that just so happened to be my favorite. Malcatras Maiden is definitely the better game. It's longer, there's art and animation, the plot has a bit more complexity to it, but Slime Feet hits differently for me personally. The game is short, really short, so short that there's not even a save and load system, as I found out the hard way when I played it, and yet in its like 1 hour runtime I bawled my eyes out twice. The plot is simple. The story takes place at a fantasy version of an Arctic research base where unexplainable phenomena are studied, and one of the scientists, Estelle, gets infected by one such supernatural phenomenon, an incurable miasma that slowly liquefies your body over the course of several days until it kills you. Outside of this initial scene, the rest of the story is told over text. The station is under quarantine for unrelated reasons, and so Estelle, locked alone in her room, has to report on how her body is affected by the pathogen at the start of each day, and then spends the rest of the time messaging another one of the scientists, Abby, with whom she's got a friends with benefits type situationship. You know how the story will end as soon as it starts. While the messages between these two girls is fairly tame at first, that doesn't last very long, and so much of the game is spent reading very detailed sexting. The story isn't toxic in the way the others are. The pain comes from the situation rather than the way the characters treat each other. It's also not exactly easy to enjoy in the way that the biting scene in Malmaid, or any of the drama in My Girlfriend Isn't Here Today is, no matter how well written the smut is you're reading it with knowledge of the inevitable end in mind. And I think that's precisely why this story affects me in a way that none of the others do. Obviously, the game is about the pain of long-distance relationships and making do with the options available to you under such circumstances, with the added, inevitable, knowable time limit. There's also the fact that, while Estelle is the point of view character for the initial infection, everything past that is read as chat logs. You don't get to see Estelle's internal thoughts about her condition at any point once the chat logs start, only her morning reports and what she says to Abby. In fact, both girls make reference to another member of the Arctic Station, the Overseer, who has access to all these logs and will undoubtedly be able to read them whenever they want, and oh, that's us, isn't it? Reading through the tragedy well after the fact. Of course, Estelle will die, and Abby is naturally more concerned with making the most of their remaining time together to give a shit about what people may think about their roleplay. To change topics for a second, have you ever been in a long-distance relationship? I have. Have you ever had a long-distance relationship end? I have. Have you ever been left with 200,000 Discord chat messages documenting your entire relationship from beginning to end, able to be revisited at any time your worst impulses get the better of you, devoid of external context, details about how you were feeling in any given moment when you were saying something left up to either your fallible memory or guesswork? Every I love you, every fight, every inside joke, every filthy roleplay session, easily searchable, quantifiable, revisitable, documenting the journey to the inevitable end. The second time I cried reading Slime Feet was the end. The first time was the first time they had quote-unquote sex, as though they were in the same room and it was really happening, and not something they'd never be able to experience with one another ever again. To end off, I want to talk about a game that barely qualifies as Yuri, but it's by video, so I can do what I want. No Skin is an indie horror roguelike that is simultaneously about having drunk hallucinatory nightmares about all of your friends secretly hating you and turning into monsters while passed out at a party, and also about killing God. You may think it's a metaphor at the start, I did it first, and it's not a metaphor, but you definitely are also literally attempting to kill God within the game's universe. Calling No Skin a roguelike is also somewhat misleading, which is what I love so much about it. Sure, it plays like a roguelike, but it's not like Slay the Spire or Binding of Isaac, where you're particularly likely to want to keep playing once you've seen all the content. No Skin is a mystery puzzle game in disguise, and though the story itself is incredibly vague and open to interpretation, it is also definitely Yuri. The intersection shows you running into a skinless corpse in the hallway, who tasks you with finding his skin. Begin game. The gameplay is simple. You're shown a selection of 3 rooms, and the odds of a certain event happening while you're in the room. Usually a battle with one of your friends, and then a less likely chance for an event. Each run is split into 3 sections, with the world getting more distorted as you pass through them. Because this game is a mystery and best experienced with as little knowledge going into it as possible, I'm not going to go into specifics as to how exactly one goes about unraveling the mystery, but I will talk about what is apparent from a typical run through the game, as well as some overarching themes that become clearer once you're deeper into it. When you hit the second section of a run and your friends begin to mutate into horrible monsters, you also get the ability to talk. And nobody has anything nice to say about you. Your entire friend group hates each other, and outside of the nightmare, nobody wants to say anything about it. And you, Noir, the main character, have been incensed by a Yuri-related incident to move on. Knowledge is key in this game. You learn what items you get from each room, what events are good or bad, and probably that some rooms are way more useful than others, and then there's kind of an optimal strategy that reduces replayability in the long term, but whatever. And see your friends turn into monsters and talk about how much they hate you over and over again while trying to figure out what you could possibly do differently to break the cycle. You'll get the bad end over and over again, which the skinless corpse in the hallway is apparently very real in an intersection between nightmarish metaphor and cruel video game reality, and you pray for the loop to restart, continuing to live in hell than staying in an unlivable reality. The game is literally about dwelling on the past for so long, analyzing every little detail until you're able to confront the root of your issues and break the cycle. No more reliving the past, no more accepting that the pain you're experiencing is better than any alternative, no more acting on your worst impulses. I wanted to have this game last because it has the thematically most optimistic end. A story focused about escaping toxicity rather than drowning in it. It's the only story of those I've talked about today that imagines the possibility of change, and how painful that process can be. I think that's an important thing to remember in life, that change is always possible. Thanks for watching.